Today, the U.S. government is trying to confirm reports that a notorious Taliban leader has been killed. Mullah Omar founded the terror group in 1996 and was a known key ally of Osama bin Laden.
Afghan officials said today that Omar may have been killed 2 months ago. Let's get straight to Michael Morell. He's a senior security contributor for CBS News and a former deputy director of the CIA. Mike, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
There have been numerous reports in the past that this man was killed. If this is true, how big of a deal is this?
Yeah, first let me say I'm a little skeptical of this particular report. This report says he was killed 2 years ago. It's hard to believe that he died 2 years ago and we're just learning about it now. So I'm a little skeptical of the report. But if it is true, if he is dead, then I think there are some pretty significant implications. He held the organization together, right? He had that kind of authority. He had that kind of influence. And there are different factions in the Taliban. One faction was, let's fight to the end. Another faction was, let's negotiate with the Afghans. And so his departure from the scene would, I think, lead to a fracturing of the organization, right? But there's also a new faction to worry about, and those are the Taliban guys who now want to join ISIS. And he's also held them together. So his departure would be a good thing in allowing the negotiation faction to get more voice, but it'd be a bad thing in allowing the ISIS faction to grow and leave the Taliban.
Mike, he wasn't always our enemy. Give us a little backstory, because he actually tried to work with the U.S. years ago, right?
Well, I mean, he worked with us, right? He worked with the coalition that forced the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. I don't know if he worked directly with us, but he was certainly on our side in that respect. But then they took over Afghanistan, right? And they put in place a very, very harsh government, right? And they, most importantly, harbored al-Qaeda and bin Laden and didn't turn them over. Repeated U.S. requests to do so. They are as much responsible, the Taliban, for 9/11 as al-Qaeda was.
And interestingly enough, I think that a lot of people would look at the Taliban back then and look to them and say this perhaps was a precursor to ISIS, in the sense that they wanted to destroy all things that were not related to Islam. He destroyed temples, Buddhist temples that were thousands of years old in Afghanistan. But he was sort of a shadowy figure. He was not as visible as Osama bin Laden. Right.
But he also had an awful lot of charisma in an Afghan sense, and that's where his and religious stature in an Afghan sense, and that's where his power and influence came from.
How was he able to elude authorities for so long?
Bin Laden hid from us for 12 years. Right? The Unabomber hid from the FBI here for 17 years. So it is possible to hide if you want to.
Was he responsible at all for any direct attacks? You said that he's as much responsible for 9/11 as Osama bin Laden is. In the years after that, was he responsible pulling the strings on any other attacks against the U.S. or its allies?
So he was the leader of the Taliban, you know, ever since 9/11 and prior to 9/11. So any Taliban attack against the United States, any Taliban killing of an American soldier is at the end of the day on Mullah Omar's hands.
Mike, before we move on to another topic, there are reports that in recent months, perhaps as early as last year, that he was making overtures to the United States to come up with some kind of a peace agreement. Any truth to those rumors at all?
I think that the Taliban in general, and Mullah Omar in particular, were always interested in, quote, a peace agreement, right? And there would be occasional outreaches. But a peace agreement to them was the Taliban government back in Kabul. That's how they viewed the end state of a peace agreement.
All right.